Klaus, it's nice to meet you on a Future Crisis conference in 2014 in Prague. I would like to ask you a couple of questions. The first is, how do you see the conference? Is it successful? What were the main points it brought to you? What are the visions that you could draw from the conference?
Okay, well, first of all, I'm very excited to be here. Typically, conferences you go to are one nation. And the fact that this brings together a number of nations, like I counted it up, and you have 25 or 30 nations here, I think that's very, very important. And the other thing that's different about this conference, a lot of times you have military and the private sector, but here you have legislative people too, and I think that's extremely critical because technology people can put together devices and new technologies, innovations. Military can say what they want, but without the legislation and the leaders understanding what the mission requirements are, like we just had a great presentation upstairs by Lieutenant General Shea, who's retired United States Marine Corps. And he talked about the need for leaders to understand mission requirements and balance those in a risk management situation. And I think you're accomplishing that. Plus people can go around the exhibit floor and see all kinds of different demonstrations, which I think is really important. Talking about things is one thing, seeing them is another thing altogether. So I think that's great.
Okay. Talking about legislations, you probably know that there is a new cyber security law in Czech Republic.
Yes.
On a couple of months. So how do you feel this thing? We are the first in Europe.
Well, I'm a big advocate of that. The United States, I was chancellor of the Information College at the National Defense University and responsible for cyber education across the federal government. But the problem is it's really hard to teach things until you have a framework. So you need legislation in a country because otherwise there's no standardization. Everybody's going out doing their own thing and you don't really have a goal or a target or a framework to work within. So I think the legislation and with the Czech Republic doing that is extremely important, and I think it sets a good example for others. Now, that's got to be followed up with the strategies and the implementation, the governance procedures that bring together the government, the interagency, the military, and the private sector. That is a big issue because the private sector often knows things that the military doesn't know. So how do you get that collaboration and sharing, and how do you build the trust that makes me as a corporation want to share my information with you as a government without intruding on my business and my privacy? I think that's a huge issue, but a law is what's needed to put that in motion.
Okay, cybersecurity. This is the very frequent topic, especially the last years. You know, there is a really progressive development of this topic. Do you feel some significant changes during this year? Are there some visions? We are talking sometimes about the cyber army.
I come from the United States, and every day I pick up the newspaper and I read that something's been hacked, whether it's a Target store, whether it's a bank. There's some discussion about different banks have been hacked. I have talked to people from the British Banking Association, and banks obviously affect your whole economy. If there's distrust in a bank and what's going on, so you get into compliance issues, you get into audit issues. So how much as a bank am I willing to tell somebody else? And how do you attribute an attack? Like, it's really hard to tell where an attack, attribution of where an attack's coming from is extremely difficult. So that's a technological problem, but it's back into the partnership thing. What are we going to do? What framework are we going to put it in? Because everything is connected now and becoming more connected every day. I mean, think about it. I do my banking, I do my travel, I do my buying, I do everything online. So we had a breach in the U.S. In Target, as you probably heard about. So I had to change every one of my credit cards. passwords, and I had automatic payments set up. So it's a tremendous effect. When there's a breach, you don't know where it's going to go or what it's going to do, and you also don't know what information is being collected on you or on your company or on your country that can be used later. Now, one thing that we did when I was Chancellor of the Information College, and I am trying to share that now through my private company, we took looks at things like what happened in Estonia, what happened in Georgia, what happens when you have a cyber attack, but what happens when it's combined with a kinetic attack. And there are lessons to be learned. What do you do on education? Singapore, for example, is taking their youth in the elementary schools and they're learning basic cyber hygiene. What do you do? Why are passwords important? You don't leave your devices out. So we have to educate a whole new generation. And the biggest problem that I see in the cyber world is one, standards. Like if you go through a program and I go through a program and we're going to be a network administrator, how do we know those standards are the same? Okay, I think you need consistent standards. But more important than that, we need cyber leadership programs, and that's what we did in the U.S. in the iCollege. Leaders need to understand the relationship between policy, strategy, governance, cyber law, tools, and how to develop both private-public partnerships and international partnerships to solve some of these issues. So I think it's a huge issue. And the problem is most CEOs do not understand all these issues. They think it's a technical problem. It's not a technical problem. It's a leadership problem.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And wish you a successful conference.
I'm enjoying it, and I look forward to the next 2 days here. Thank you very much.